So I see we are at the top of the hour. So I respect everyone's time and commitment. So let's get started. Let me start screen sharing and pull out my slides. And I will close the thumbnails to have a clear view and not get disturbed or obscured parts of the slides. I hope everybody can see them. And I will try to control them just using a mouse. So if I don't manage, just forgive me, but seems it's working. So welcome to this 5th study group meeting. And we are going to talk about quality management support, generating and maintaining records. This sounds like a super boring topic, I know. But it's important, as everybody knows. If it's not documented, it does not exist. It did not happen. It's a nice story. You can tell me again, but I want to see evidence. I want to see some proof. In God we trust, all others show data. That's old auditors rule. Inspectors follow the same approach, so it's fine. And by the way, it happens so many times. I read, for example, SOPs or look at research center records, and I think it's a disaster. Then I watch people doing things and I listen to them and I say, no, they know what they are doing. Actually, what they do is much better than what I understand they are doing from their records and documentation. So these two should not be light years apart, should be ideally telling the same story. So that's one thing. And the other thing, which is typically very poorly documented, is oversight. Whether it's investigator oversight of delegated activities to this team, whether it's sponsors oversight of vendors, this documentation is practically in 100% times lacking. It may not be easy, and I've seen it actually a PI of a very big research center. And he said, yes, I'm communicating daily with my study coordinator, with my team. They were using WhatsApp. He showed me the messages. I said, yes, this is wonderful. So ask your study coordinator to use the WhatsApp desktop client and download and file. It's not that difficult. It can be done. I can accept it. And I understand you have this ease of communication. But if you just keep it in your phone, imagine you drown it, somebody steals it, something happens, and everything is lost. So even if our investigators or project managers or the team found themselves, they use some kind of communication app, which may be limited by company policies. In some other times, it's not. But there is always a way to get it out of the device. That should be done. So what kind of records and what are we going to talk about? These are processes for physical capturing, and physical does not mean I write on a piece of paper. Physical capturing includes electronic. And documenting observations, comments, recommendations, actions, and quality assurance activities. Still to wait, right? So let's take a look what it includes. Audit-generated records, plans, observations, reports, certificates, correspondence, CAPAs, quality training and staff development activities, regulatory visits and inspections, trend analysis records of audit observations, corrective and preventive actions, and communications required by the quality system. Your quality management system should basically define what should be documented. And this is not defined on some kind of random basis, and it applies both to electronic, paper, and hybrid records. Think just for a moment, each record has a life cycle. It does not appear out of the blue. We either receive it or create it, then it's distributed, used. The active storage means that's during the time we are using it. Active study, for example, or active vendor engagement. Then we have inactive storage and retention, which could be long-term archiving, which could be waiting for long-term archiving, but the records are not used. Imagine, for example, that we have, let's say, clinical database in a study, meaning all the ECRF records and any kind of lab data coming in, or ERT, the IRT data, whatever. And then is the data cleaning, and then is the process for locking it. But still it exists. Now when it's locked, it's inactive storage. Nobody should access it. But we are not going to suspend the access because we still need, for example, and that's typical in Europe, there is a regular expectation from the EMA agency that the PIs are given records for their study participants, and these should be verified against the database with just few only access to make sure everything is there. You would say this is nonsense. I completely agree with you. It was my comment for the draft guidelines saying nobody is going to do that. And there is technology that can do it much faster, much cheaper, and much more reliably. But still, there is time, and that's what I wanted to point out, between the database lock and the actual confirmation, okay, now it can be really decommissioned, all the data are out, everything goes out. There might be some, let's say, last PV review before the data goes to the statistician for analysis. Disposition or archiving, some records might not need long-term preservation. Some records are necessary to be preserved for a long time. 25 years per the upcoming ICH E3, although it does not define, so it's derived from regulations. And if you have, for example, in Europe, advanced medicine products, by default, the archiving period is 30 years. But many pharma companies, many sponsors decide to keep and archive their data for time indefinite. Maybe in future there will be possibility for repurposing or some kind of use. There is always a potential use of some old data. So most of the pharma companies that I'm auditing for, they have their policy like, okay, it stays forever. And even some regulations say, for example, PD records must be archived forever. There are a few important questions we should be asking ourselves to make sure we have good process that preserves integrity of records. What is the purpose of it? Is it required by regulations? What is the criticality of the record? What is the classification? Is it confidential, restricted, intern? Is it public? So it needs different safeguards. We should be aware of the RQAP plus or plus plus principle, meaning all the records and all the data should be attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, plus complete, consistent, enduring, and available. Typically available meaning when needed, whether it's an inspection or there might be like one of my clients, they are going to sell one of their products. And they said, yeah, the study that the approval was based on was finished 10 years ago, but we have a feeling the monitoring was not really very rigorous. Can you audit all the site records? Meaning I'm going to dig if data 10 years old and see what I can find and what story it tells. If something is missing, then there will be a problem, and potential customer of my client may say, thank you very much, we are not going to buy. So there might be business implications later on or opportunities that either are materialized or get missed. We need access to original records or certified copies. audit trail documentation of audit trail reviews. And that can be a tricky question. How to document the audit trail review? Not every audit trail is very user-friendly. I'm still waiting for an audit trail in any kind of electronic system used in the GCP area that would have the possibility, just say, like for monitoring, for ECRF, to make something verified, review, confirm it right there without having additional trackers, additional logs, additional inventions, how to do that, something simple that can be exported, that can be time-stamped, and so on. Version control, authorship review, approval, availability of effective records at the point of use. The site have their own SOPs, or my colleagues have their SOPs. Are these available when they need them, where they work? Now with the electronic, it's typically easier, but there might be situations where there is no internet connection, and the data downloads would be limited. So there should be a kind of view into these to make sure that anybody who needs to refer to them any point of time during their work and their duties, they have the possibility. The same goes for protocol and many other things at the sites. Validation of systems generating electronic records, backups, retrieval, protection, cybersecurity, retention period, change management. And one last thing I would like to mention here. Remember, emails are not suitable records of decisions. Still, it happens the project manager or the sponsor, responsible person, they send an instruction by email. Try to find it 5 years later. It will be extremely difficult and challenging, if not impossible. Because the title may not be unique. We may not remember who sent it, when it was sent. We just remember, yeah, there was something. But where is it? The important thing is, I know there was something, but even more important is to be able to. So beware, emails are for all kinds of communication, but not to document important decisions.
Another thing that's interesting about emails, which I found out, is even if you take them and quote unquote archive them, electronically, when you archive them, they take on the date that you actually archived them. So, if you're doing it January 1st, all the dates will be January 1st. And then I would say it'd be virtually impossible to find something because you could have hundreds of emails that way. So that's definitely a thing that we try to recommend, or when we ask for documentation and they say, oh, it's in my email, then print them out and make sure that they are complete with the correct dates and titles.
Yeah, printing out does not mean you have to have it on paper. It can be print to PDF, of course.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Sorry.
The other thing about emails is that really the appropriate place to document decision-making from a regulatory records perspective? Usually, or there should be, if you're talking about protocol deviation or suitability of something, there's usually a better place like the medical records or somewhere else where that should be documented, not emails, so that otherwise at the end of the study, you've got the study documents and you got a whole host of emails that, because they forgot to do this or forgot to record that. So emails are a bad choice for a whole bunch of reasons.
Yes. And how many of you have seen an email corrupted? Something is missing, it gets truncated, there was an attachment, it's not there anymore. So yes, our one voice message is, be very careful about emails and don't use them for recording important things. And why? Work and processes go wrong. Anything go wrong, we know that. Murphy's laws, the only reliable ones. Disclosure of confidential information of all kinds, breaches, leaks, And that can be very costly if it's, let's say, sensitive information of the company related to the product or study. That can be, of course, used by competitors. It can be made public in the wrong time. If it's study participant data, that's even worse, because we may be breaching regulations. And if your participant is a GDPR data subject, that can be very costly because it can trigger GDPR compliance inspection. And if you are found to having a problem, then the penalties are 20 million or 4% of the company annual revenues, whichever is higher or lower. So that can be really painful. Verification is not possible. Data and records cannot be trusted. We see all kinds of deviations, non-compliance, premature destruction of records, damage, loss of records. That goes also sometimes to very inferior archiving procedures and archiving areas, which are not suitable by default. There are some good archiving practices. There are minimum requirements for archives. Decisions under the justification cannot be presented to auditors and inspectors. And that can again launch a whole avalanche of further issues. Damage to reputation, erosion of trust, financial loss, up to cease and desist, out of business. So we want reliable, trustworthy records to reconstruct what has happened in a study, what has happened in a particular, say, adverse event case, whatever. Let me give you a very brief example of the importance. That goes back in late 90s. Everything is on paper. A young lady, 35, diagnosed with early stage Parkinson disease after a couple of weeks of taking the medication, which was a breakthrough application. It was a patch for the first time ever instead of the handfuls of pills. So it was very promising, and the company put a lot of hopes in that. She suffered severe psychotic attack. She was taken into psychiatric hospital, spent 3 months there, lost her job because the attack happened in the presence of her small son. The boy was scared of her when she returned back home, the social stigma and so on. The investigator properly reported serious adverse event in correct time, within 24 hours, and in his honest opinion and his professional judgment, the event was possibly related. And then friend of this patient advised her, you see, what do you have in your informed consent? You are entitled to have a compensation for what happened to you. So the lady asked the investigator called me, I was the monitor at the time, and I passed the request to the sponsor. And suddenly the sponsor had no procedure how to deal with claims for compensation. So everybody was, like hot potato, giving it to someone else before it burns my hand. And then finally, somebody remembered, yeah, we have an insurance for these cases. So they approached the insurance company. Guess what? Insurance company wants to collect money, not to pay money. So they had their own expert who provided a kind of funny report saying, no, it cannot be related. This is definitely nothing to do with the medication, nothing to do with the study. We are not going to pay anything because such cases that are not related to the study are not covered by the insurance. The sponsor sent it back to us, and I was reading it. I thought like it was weird. The investigator, when I told him, was so sure it could not be excluded. And I was discussing it with my colleagues, and somebody told me, hey, there is a key opinion leader. So try to engage him to support. I did. He picked up the phone of an unknown number, was willing to sign a confidentiality agreement because I just gave the general information, and within 2 weeks produced almost 40-page long report with citations from the literature and scientific publications, clearly showing that this class of medication is known in certain patients with certain precondition that cannot be seen before to have this kind of effect. With that, finally, the sponsor was able to get the money from the insurance company. But the insurance company tried to question whether the assay report was created, whether it was sent on time. What was exactly at the assay report? What the investigators said upon the follow-up information? Was there any follow-up report? We had everything. It took 1 year to get justice served. So you see the importance of timely documentation, keeping all records, and not giving up. That's maybe another point. If there is something big at stake, like in this case, because I felt like I cannot let it go, it's against my ethical principles. Just somebody needs to help this poor lady. So we want safe and effective products for the consumers, and to be able to verify that what we did was done properly, and if there was an error, it was appropriately addressed. And the right people with the right qualifications and the right competencies worked on the project. Let's go to exam practice questions. Some of them you've probably seen before. So, which of the following documentation, since we talk about records, by the way, in GCPR 3, we have now the term records instead of documentation. Documentation somehow subconsciously implies paper. Record could be paper, could be electronic, could be hybrid. So don't be surprised when GCPR 3 shows up, finally, hopefully next year, you will see records, not documentation. Let's demonstrate that a person is qualified by education, training, and experience. Select just one. CV, GCP training, professional license. CV, performance review, employee profile, whatever it may be. GCP training, job description, delegation log, or last option, job description, diploma, and delegation log. Now, I can't see what is in the chat because it will obscure my slide. So, Michael, Pam, can you tell me what are the options?
We have mostly 1 and 1 number 3.
Okay. So the person who selected number 3, are you willing to speak up and say a reason for your selection?
They just changed it. They said they read it too fast, which we all know that happens.
Yeah, good point. Read carefully the question, read carefully all the answers. It might be one word difference. And so many times it happened to me. I scan quickly the question with my eyes and I missed not. There is something asking what is not the correct thing. And instead I ask what is the correct thing because I missed the not. And it happens again and again and again. So reading it really carefully is important. And yes, you are right. Section 2.8 says the correct answer is CV, GCP training, and professional license. With my caveat here, if we talk about, let's say, qualifications of a monitor or regulatory specialist, meaning people working in a CRO, for example, or in a pharma company, they may not have any professional license. In some countries, even doctors do not have license. In the US, you need it for a state. If you want to practice in another state, you need to be licensed there as well. So keep in mind that this can differ from one country to another. The license thing. certified copy. What does it mean? Copy that has been verified to have the same information as the original, a duplicate of an original record, a printout of an electronic medical record, a copy of the original that has been signed by the principal investigator. Now, what are the choices?
Looks like we have all ones so far.
Anyone thinks differently than one?
Nope.
You can unmute, you can jump into the discussion. You are most welcome to do that. And yes, you are right. Copy that has been verified to have the same information as the original. Again, this can be tricky. For example, imagine ECG record. It's copied. It says it's verified to have the same information as the original. And maybe 2 months later, the participant develops some kind of problem. The ECG is sent back to a cardiologist for a second assessment, and the cardiologist may write on it. If it's the original ECG tracing, then we may have a problem with a certified copy that was made right after. So certified copies ideally would be used instead of the original, which in some geographies, in some jurisdictions, like according to FDA, can be destroyed later on. Other regulatory agencies said, no way. Again, it's specific to an agency. So we should make sure that we use one record from that time onward, and not this one or that one, and then trying to reconcile what is actually the true certified copy, and does it have still the validity it's supposed to have. Informed consent. According to ICH E6, which of the following should be included in the informed consent documentation? Signature and date of the participant and the investigator, signature and date of the investigator and coordinator, signature and date of the participant and the person who conducted the informed consent discussion, and the discussion and the signature and date of the witness and the person obtaining consent. That should be very easy to answer. So what are the options we are seeing?
Looks like all three, all have answered 3 so far.
And yes, that's correct. Of course, the person who conducted the informed consent discussion can be the principal investigator or can be coordinator in some cases. I've seen many coordinators were sub-investigators / coordinator, and they were qualified physicians. So there was absolutely nothing wrong. So again, this is a kind of little bit of trick, because the first feeling may be, yeah, participant and investigate. Now, do you think that this is the absolutely perfect answer if we talk about informed consent documentation, not informed consent form? Any opinions? Our panelists, feel free to join if the
Well, there may be the case that they have a legally appointed representative that may be the signature on an informed consent.
or witness or guardian, which is required in some jurisdictions.
Mhm.
But the other thing is, informed consent, we are not saying informed consent document, which would be the information for the participant and the form to sign. But if we talk about informed consent documentation, that for me implies source document that describes the consenting procedure. Did the participant ask questions? Were they answered? Did the participant have enough time was he or she given the informed consent maybe a couple of days ahead of the discussion? So this for me would be additional important information. It's not only the informed consent document, it's capturing the process, because informed consent or consenting is a process. It's not the signature act. So just to keep in mind, if you are, for example, auditing site or doing quality oversight visit, it's perfect. Of course, we expect the informed consent document signed, but we also expect description how the consenting is done. Sorry, let me just kill my notifications. Source documents. We talk about the RQAP principle, so it should be easy for you to choose. I'm not going to repeat it for the sake of time, but we have 4 options. Each starts with the same word, attributable, and then we have differences. So what is the favorite choice for our colleagues?
Looks like we have all ones.
Yeah, I mean, this should be, even if you don't remember the obscure, that sounds weird. Anticipate, observe, outstanding, meaning pending, or meaning excellent. Outstanding can have 2 different meanings. So these are obviously answers that sound like, nah, this is not an option. So yes, you are right. Attributable, meaning we know the originator of the record. Legible, I can read it. Contemporaneous is as close to the event it describes, captures as possible. Sometimes it cannot be simultaneous, but if it can, even better. If it cannot, as soon as was possible after. What would the investigator remember from an informed consent discussion or assessment of eligibility or discussing adverse event 2 weeks later, having seen many other patients and participants in the meantime? Is that reliable? Original, meaning also could be the certified copy, meaning it's not a kind of copy, and accurate. There are no mistakes, no errors. Now, where are the study personnel roles and responsibilities documented at the trial center site, the trial site? So, the CVs of the site who are working, of the personnel who are working on this trial, list of appropriately qualified persons who are delegated to trial-related duties, monitoring visit report along with the FDA 1572, and the 1572 that is required for any trial under an IND. So, what is your choice?
Looks like we have 2s across the board.
Guys, it's obvious that you are ready to get the exam. Go for it and sit for it. Yes, 1572 is the statement of the investigator, and it's basically a statement to follow the protocol. So that does not say anything. Yes, it talks about the responsibility of the investigator, and it lists some other stuff, but not their exact responsibilities. So always
We have a
there
question.
should.
We have a
Okay.
question. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Can you explain what the FDA 1572 form is?
Yes, it's the statement of the investigator. You can Google it. It exists in an electronic fillable PDF. And basically it says the site address, the name of the PI, any typically medically qualified personnel or people involved in generating data and records related to objectives of the study, labs. What else? The protocol title. I don't think the ethics approval date is required to be there. I don't think so, as much as I
Oh, but
recall.
usually the IRB or ethics committee is listed.
Yeah, they are listed. They are listed the same as the labs are listed with their address, but there is not necessarily the approval date. So that's,
No,
yes, it's the
it doesn't
list.
capture any dates. It's just documentation of information about the investigator and the site, labs and IRB that are related to that site.
Yeah, and it's basically commitment of the PI to follow the approved protocol and applicable regulations and so on and so forth.
And that,
Financial information, which someone else asked, that is captured on a different form, a separate form. There is a requirement for all investigators and sub-investigators to provide financial information regarding any potential conflicts.
That's a totally different form, the financial disclosure.
Yes.
Yeah, but these do not contain either the financial disclosure. It basically says, do I have interest in the study outcomes? Am I paid by the sponsor? Do I have shares there? Or my spouse, my dependent children? Meaning, what is the purpose? Is there a potential that my observations and my records would be biased in favor of the product because I may gain something financially? That's the whole point behind. But going back to delegation, many times I see two mistakes during audits. One is that it's a kind of template, very general template, and many study-specific things and activities are missing. So there may be a line other, but it's not used. And then I'm asking, okay, and who is doing this or who is doing that? Because I just take the flow chart from the protocol of the activities. I ask who are people doing these things? I cannot see who does it from this delegation log because it does not include these things. So it should be always customized. That's one important thing. The other important thing is I see it more as a living document. So it's not something to be completed before at site initiation and stays the same except for adding people or putting end date if somebody leaves. The responsibilities, most of the times, are put based on experience from other studies and expectations. And you can find strange things like, for example, a technician is responsible to evaluate adverse events. No, it's not. And that was put there in the beginning. And when I go there in the middle of the study, I say, is really the lab technician evaluating the adverse events? No, of course not. It's the investigator. Okay, but I see the lab technician delegating. So what I'm trying to say is the assumptions made in the very beginning may prove wrong during the course of the study. There is absolutely nothing wrong, and it would be many times messy to try to correct everything and every correction, initial date and explain. And finally, you have a complete mess. Why not to have a version 2 of the delegation log? I see absolutely no problem about that. We had a discussion now on the SQA Connect with a guy from Ghana asking about the site file is already archived, but we still have procedures for drug destruction, which is purely related to pharmacy. Should we go and reopen the delegation log? My feeling is this is something very specific to the end of this study, to dealing with the IP. And it's a very specific procedure in Sub-Sahara anyway. You have community participants, community leaders, and the police and regulators, and so on and so forth. So it's a huge gathering to destroy the IP. Why not to have a separate delegation log for that, a new one, which is then put in the pharmacy binder and that goes to archive. There is no regulation saying that you cannot update it, you cannot change it, you cannot have one for lab, you cannot have one for pharmacy. If it fits the purpose, fine. Be practical. That's the whole point. And the other thing that I was saying in the beginning is very frequent. The initials are put, wonderful log letters. Anyone can do that. And sometimes the coordinator completes it, or the monitor even completes it, or I've seen it, and I swear to God I did, typed on a computer. Initials are abbreviated signatures. This is the super fast signature that someone puts when they review this or this or that. You have the model signature, the full, and you have the abbreviated signature for the typical quick use. But these should be unique for the person who makes them. And not that anybody can do the same thing. And I noticed a delegation log and the PI signature was completely different there from all other records. I asked him, why did you do that? He said, there was not enough space. So I was trying to modify my signature to fit there, which was a kind of like, my goodness. Don't be afraid to cross the cell, but make it your usual signature. It's like if you have this kind of signature on your check that you give to somebody, the bank would refuse to pay it because it does not fit to your signature model that the bank has. So initials and signature, this is the model that helps me to identify who this person who initialed or signed a particular record is, because it's not necessarily very legible. Mine is not. So, and doctors typically are known for not very neat handwriting. So we want these logs, which is a kind of one who does what, and then I can check, is this person adequately qualified to do that? And second, to make sure that I can find, if I see something signed or initialed, okay, this is the one. So it's this person. A little bit long discussion about delegation, but I keep seeing so many delegation logs which are deficient. It's almost in every audit, which is scary, but it is. So let's move to the next question. Audit recording and reporting. Why it is important to report or keep records of trend analysis of audit observations and corrective actions. Well, to give them to the FDA and impress them. To present in the annual progress report to the FDA, utilize it in assessing effectiveness of actions over time, and to include it in the final clinical study report. So choose one.
Looks like we have number 3 across the board.
Guys, you are perfect. It's amazing. Yes, definitely. One quick note. If you want to be able to analyze anything, then there should be a kind of standardization of how to write observations, how to write corrective actions, to limit, too much of creativity. Because if you have every single thing, every single observation in every single case, and it describes differently even the same thing, you may have the same observation, but just the description is different. Try to fit it in any analysis pack in Excel. It would not. Trust me, it wouldn't. Because you need to have some kind of pattern that any kind of trend analysis tool can look at. If everything is different, it's impossible to analyze. I know what I'm talking about. I spent almost a month trying to analyze something for a client a couple of years ago. And first of all, I had somehow to standardize the description of the protocol deviations, because otherwise it was totally impossible to get any views, any insights, use any kind of analysis in there. Ideally, if it's electronic, it's pre-populated, drop-down menu options, what you can see. Additional information may be common, but we need something that can be subject to analysis. Why is it advisable to develop procedures for preparing, managing, and reporting of sponsor/client audit activities? Comply with trending requirements for consistently identifying and documenting data errors, because such procedures are required by FDA regulations and must be available during inspection. To have a consistent and meaningful approach for identifying debarred and disqualified contract research organizations or other clinical vendors. To ensure audit activities are performed in a manner that will provide information about state of compliance. Now it's not easy to pick up the longest answer as the potentially correct. All are approximately the same length. So what are the options? What do you see there?
I see number 4 across the board.
Guys, you will join the faculty for the next round of study groups. I want to see the names. Yes, correct. Why it cannot be 3? Because FDA does not debar CROs or other clinical vendors, only investigators. Audit report. Now it's going to be a little bit more complicated. This is the second type of questions you may see. You may have either select one or here. Observations in an audit report may allow management to do which of the following? Determine needs for present training. Determine the safety profile of an IP. Identify potential non-compliance in future projects. Define why protocols are not well designed. Determine the needs for process improvement. And you can choose option 1, 1, 4, and 5, 1, 3, and 5, 2, 4, and 5, or 1, 2, and 3. So think about it, give it a moment, and then what do you choose in this case?
We have 5 answers of number 2. And that's it. Everybody's on number 2.
Okay. There should be more answers just looking at the number of participants.
Yep.
Anyone would like us to try? If your selection is not good, we can talk about why it's not good. That's why we are here. No worries. No other choices? Right? Yes, that's correct. 1, 3, and 5. Is training needed? Okay, if we see a problem in this project, it gives us some good information to evaluate risks for future projects and what we should be thinking about. We take our lessons learned, and yes, needs for process improvements. At a minimum, which elements should be included in a training record? Training topic, agenda, and trainer signature, trainee name, number of hours, certification for trainer, training topic, regulatory reference, date of training, training topic, training name, and date of training. And your choices. Michael, can you tell me what's in the chat?
It looks like everybody's picked number 4.
And that's correct. Personally, I like to see training agenda as additional information. Because you may have, for example, GCP training or another kind of training, but what actually was really covered? And if I see, and that's sometimes also the case, you see extensive agenda that is provided upon a request, and you see that the training took less than 1 hour. And it's absolutely impossible to cover the agenda in less than 1 hour. So it indicates something about the approach of the auditee to training. It's maybe just a checkbox exercise, but gives you, if you are auditing, for example, if you are doing vendor qualification audit, then this kind of insights, the approach to training, can you see the agenda? How long did it take? Does it make sense what you see? That gives really good hints about the approach to training, how seriously it's taken, and let's say the reliability and trustworthiness of the potential vendor. Because if you see like, okay, the approach is fake it till you make it, I would advise my client, let's look somewhere else. Site visit documentation. I believe this is the last question we have here. After a visit to the site, which of the following is the monitor required to complete? Again, select one: participant identification log, monitoring plan, monitoring report, investigator brochure. And actually, except for one, all the answers are absolute nonsense, so it should be super easy. What do we see?
We have 3s across the board.
Yeah, I mean, all the other options are such obvious nonsense. It's you cannot select it even as a joke. Correct. But since we have a couple of more minutes, why is the monitor writing monitoring? And I see again and again, and before any site visit or site audit, I ask for monitoring visit reports. And I see it's like, okay, like triplicate of the same thing. Maybe there are few people, like different attendants, and maybe a couple of more things are checked. But otherwise, it's a kind of recycled form, which does not tell me really what did the monitor do at this visit, at this site. If I am the sponsor, the monitor is my extended hands and eyes and ears. And I am getting informed what the site is doing, how they are doing, how well they are performing through the monitoring visit report. If it's not informative, then it's worthless. On the other hand, also I can see reports like there's a cumulative list of all, let's say, actions ever, or all site issues, for all protocol deviations. There are better places where to capture them. I am not interested in those that happened 2 years ago. I want to see what happened at this visit. The other things are tracked in other trackers. And if the monitoring visit report, and I've seen such, are over 70 pages long, good heavens, it's a short novel. And it's totally unfit for the purpose for what it should be serving. So again, promote good practices. Promote in your organizations to do things that are fit for purpose, meaningful, that give the result we need, and not excessive administration, burden, and basically waste of time of everyone. we have
I
one.
have a quick question
Uh-huh.
in the chat. Somebody had asked, how indicative are these of test questions?
Well, they are not the test questions that you are going to see in the exam, but it's the type of questions you will see there. So gives you the hint of, let's say, what can be asked about documentation or about RQAP, about here like regulatory inspection. So although it's not the exact question, it's like it could be. But intentionally, these questions are not taken out of the real exam for one reason. The real exam question bank is living, does not have retired questions that we would be using here. And if there is a retired question, the reason is because it's not a good question, because it was causing confusion. Something was unclear, there was an error. And that's monitored, that's evaluated, and the dedicated team reviews them. So you can take it, yeah, it's a type of question I may see there.
I'm not sure if it was mentioned before, in the certification manual that's online on the SQA site, there are some questions in there that are also the type of questions that are to be asked. There's also a sample test that you can purchase from the SQA website that has those type of questions also. And I found that very helpful just to see how the questions are asked. We also have another question, and when we take the exam, will it tell us if we pass after we submit it, or will we have to wait to find out at a later time? And I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Lydia, if you are here still with us, do you have an answer?
Hi, folks. Yes, I do have some information for you. For these kind of logistical questions, you're always, just to let you know, you're always free to email me and ask. That's rqap@sqa.org. But first, I did just want to note that the practice test that Pam is talking about, actually, those questions are the same ones that you are discussing here in these study group meetings. So there's not another practice test. It's the same questions. And then to Katie's question, when you take the exam, it would immediately tell you whether or not you passed, except in a few circumstances. Every 3 years, we set up a new form of the test. If you end up taking the exam during one of those periods where we are debuting a new form, then your exam results will not be available for maybe about a month and a half afterward. However, you will be made aware ahead of time that that is the case. And if you are taking the exam during this upcoming testing period, that is not the case. You should receive your results immediately upon completion of the exam.
Thank you. Yeah, so you don't need to worry. You are not going to be anxious for a couple of weeks to know the result.
Just when you push that button to say, I'm finished and please score it. That's a scary one.
Yeah.
We had one more question. Do you think Alcoa Plus will be there? Not knowing what questions are.
It's possible. It would not be exactly the same question we had here, but there very well can be something that is related to Alcoa. Asking about something slightly different, but yes, it's one of quite basic things regarding GCP and documentation. So I would not be surprised. I would rather expect it. Any further questions? We still have about, well, a minute. So use the time, and I'm okay to stay a couple of minutes more if you want. Just to remind you, tomorrow is our last session. So tomorrow, the same time, we will meet for our 6th study group meeting.
yeah, the comment was, didn't know if it was used across the board. Yeah, it is. Alcoa, I think every audit report I've ever written gets cited for that, so, definitely GCPs.
Yeah, it's you may say it's part of good documentation practices. And actually GCPR 3, which is going to be released next year, that has data governance and whole new chapter 4, that talks about managing records and electronic records and what to be mindful. So there is a lot of stress and a lot of importance given and prominence to good documentation and responsibilities for what kind of records and governance of data. So this is going to really stand out much more prominently than before.
Yeah, they were noting it meant the plus part. I wouldn't worry about the plus part. I would just worry about the Alcoa.
Yeah, the plus part or plus, I've even seen triple plus part. These are like additional things. The plus is from the European Medicine Agency. Then you may have some other recommendations. But okay, if you take Alcoa, that's quite an old thing, and that's the basics. And the other additions, they typically, if you think about it, just common sense and simple logic. Why and what do you need a record for? So yes, it should be available when you need it. Typically, let's say when the inspector asks about it, it should all the records should tell the same story. There should be no contradictions. So just really common sense and you. Okay, if there are no more questions, then we will finish for today and see you again tomorrow. Have a nice rest of the day. Don't worry, and tomorrow take all questions, any questions you may still have in your mind. And we can dedicate, let's say, 10, 15 minutes, even more. We can start with your questions and then just go for the practice questions in the rest of the time, because you have seen most of them anyway already in the previous sessions. So thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.